can manage things in Northern Ireland better together. Thank you.
Mr. Gaston.
Much, Mr. Speaker. Before making my own remarks here tonight, I want to begin by reading an email which I received last night, which articulates the sentiments which are seldom heard in this chamber and even more seldom heard on the airwaves. It came from a number of young, articulate Unionists concerned how the protocol is negatively impacting them. We write to you as young people who are dismayed to find that because of the Windsor framework, we are being denied the right that until recently our parents enjoyed. The right to stand for election, to make all the laws to which they were subject. In asking MLAs to vote for the motion that Articles 5 to 10 of the Protocol on Ireland, Northern Ireland to the EU Withdrawal Agreement should continue to apply during the new continuation period within the meaning of Schedule 6A to the Northern Ireland Act 1998, that the UK Government is asking you to vote in a way that has the effect of renouncing our rights to be represented in the making of the laws to which we will be subject, not just in relation to 300 laws, but 300 areas of law for a period of between 4 to 8 years. If MLAs vote for the motion, they will be voting to approve that we suffer unique humiliation, both in comparison to the dignity until recently afforded to our parents, and in relation to young people in England, Wales and Scotland, who along with their parents can still stand for election to make all the laws to which they are subject. MLAs will be voting to approve that while the citizens of the rest of the UK and the Republic of Ireland have the right to stand for election to make all the laws to which they are subject, is it right that we should have been denied this dignity since 2021 and that they should continue to deny it going forward? MLAs will be voting that it is appropriate for the law governing these islands to state that while the people of Great Britain and the Republic of Ireland are worthy of the right to stand for election, to make all the laws to which they are subject, that we are only worthy of the right to stand for election to make some of the laws to which they are subject. MLAs will also be voting in violation of international law as set out in the Good Friday Agreement, which bestowed upon the people of Northern Ireland the right to pursue democratically national and political aspirations. That right was conferred in 1998-99 when the people of Northern Ireland had the right to pursue national and political aspirations in relation to the development of all the laws to which they were subject. And so it is only possible to uphold the right from that point. If MLAs vote for this motion, they will be voting to approve the radical diminishment of that right from 2021, in violation of international law, and further for the next 4 to 8 years. MLAs further do not have the right to vote for the motion and thereby renounce our rights to be represented in the making of the laws to which we are subject, because elected representatives only represent the rights of their constituents that are bestowed in them by trust. They have no right to actually renounce our rights for a period of 4 to 8 years. This is something that logically only we, the holders of the rights, can do, which would require a referendum. However, no progressive society should countenance such a step, because asking people to renounce their democratic rights is not something that any democracy worth the name should contemplate. I'm reading out the email. I will give way at the end of it. Least anyone should seek to argue that the Stormont break and the applicability motion mechanisms resolve the difficulty such that MLAs who are Democrats can vote for the motion. They do not address the fundamental democratic problem for 2 reasons. First, there are some laws in the 300 areas to which neither the Stormont break nor the Stormont applicability motion apply. Second, whether the break and applicability motion apply, they do not change the fact that we, the people of Northern Ireland, are both disenfranchised and discriminated against when compared both to the people in England, Wales and Scotland and the Republic of Ireland. Because Northern Ireland becomes the one part of these islands where people do not have the right to stand for election to the legislator making the laws to which we are subject. In this context, even if the break and applicability motion mechanisms applied to all the relevant legislation voting to approve these regulations would still involve MLAs voting to approve that we should be uniquely discriminated against in not having the right to stand for election to make the laws to which we are subject. Democracy is non-negotiable. Any solution to any problem that involves the mass disenfranchisement of people is completely unacceptable, especially in a context where they have been fully enfranchised in relation to central government for the last 100 years. We would consequently call on you to vote on Tuesday against our disenfranchisement and to vote against the motion. A solution that involves our disenfranchisement is in one area of law, let alone 300, is not a solution at all. We trust that as Democrats you will vote against the motion or at the very least abstain. Democracy must be a non-negotiable, and we would not be able to vote for any MLA at a future election who voted for our disenfranchisement. It is a vote you have no right to cast. It is extraordinary that we are told repeatedly how important it is that young people engage in politics, only to be confronted with the bizarre spectacle of having the value of our vote significantly reduced. Please seize this debate to be the voice of young people and to wake up our Assembly out of the strange stupor into which it has fallen, and agreeing to even contemplate this extraordinary, demeaning proposition. Members, I think that email rather eloquently expresses the sentiments on which colleagues would do well to reflect upon here tonight. Before moving on to make some points in the substance of what we have before us, I want to note that Article 18.2 of the Protocol says that the consent vote was to be reached strictly in accordance with the unilateral declaration made by the United Kingdom. Members, that unilateral declaration of October 2019 published a public consultation before this vote. It is there in black and white. In the words of the declaration, there has been no consultation. So why is this vote taking place tonight? If there was an issue which trampled on the rights of any community other than the Unionist community, I have no doubt the Alliance Party would be up in arms about it. But today, absolutely.
Well, I thank the member for giving way. There are many votes in this House where my vote counts for less than his vote, and indeed other members of this House. And you're right, yes, of course we're up in arms. Treating every member of this House equally is the very definition of democracy.
I thank the member for her repeated intervention, for making her point. I don't know if they have a game in the Alliance Party to see who can make that point tonight the most, but there you go, Miss Long, there's a point for yourself. The member for South Belfast wanted an intervention. The floor is open to you if you want.
I appreciate Mr Gaston giving way again. He, and particularly when he read out the correspondence he had, majored on what he saw as the anomalous and democratic deficit situation around people not having a say in the European Parliament. There is, of course, an answer, which is Northern Ireland having MEPs. I presume, given that would answer part of his point, he would support our call for Northern Ireland to have its own MEPs. Perhaps he, or even his colleague, who is now tragically left us and gone to London, another former MEP, could return to the European Parliament.
And I will pass on your comments to Jim that you miss him dearly, and also give you a point for once again promoting your European fantasy document and having it as your prop in the chamber. Members, but today the Alliance Party are happy to propose a motion which should have been seen a long consultation, robust consultation with members of the public, but indeed that hasn't taken place. And because it doesn't affect nationalism, the Alliance Party are quite happily to go along and do what they're told to do. When it comes to Unionist rights in this chamber, Alliance, you don't see them speaking out, but certainly when it comes to nationalism, they are there front and centre leading the charge. Due process has went out the window. We have consultations about minor changes of domestic law, but today we are voting to surrender lawmaking powers to a foreign power, giving them a blank cheque to legislate over the heads of the people of Northern Ireland on a plethora of issues that no one in this House or even in the EU has even thought of yet. That is an obscenity. We meet today to debate the most important motion in the history of Northern Ireland, and shockingly, it is also the first time in half a century when this House will make a significant decision on a simple majority basis. The UK Government sought to justify removing cross-community consent in relation to this vote by arguing that it did not apply because this decision pertains to non-devolved matters. This argument, however, is plainly absurd because the Belfast Agreement does not make provision for cross-community consent to a subset of Stormont decisions but to all key Stormont decisions. It requires arrangements to ensure key decisions are taken on a cross-community basis, not arrangements to ensure key decisions of a particular kind are taken on a cross-community basis. It covers all key decisions, and this is plainly the most far-reaching decision to ever be put before us. Moreover, and in confirmation of this, had their initial argument been correct, it would have been completely unnecessary for them to then intervene to change the law to disapply cross-community consent to this decision. But this regrettable legislation was passed to disapply Section 42 of the 1998 Act. Indeed, and as if there was not enough, we must remember that the basis upon which the government sought to justify the non-application of cross-community consent was a definition of devolved matters, which kept from Stormont really controversial questions about the constitutional foundation for the relationship between the Republic of Ireland and the UK. Far from lessening the need for cross-community consent, widening the scope of decision-making into this much more controversial subject plainly increases the need for cross-community consent rather than lessen it. So on this very basis, the suggestion that there is a justification to remove cross-community consent fails, other than for the purpose of denying Unionists the protection afforded to nationalists for over 50 years, the banning of majority voting at Stormont on matters of controversy. Indeed, this is the most controversial proposition to ever come before Stormont in its 103-year history. Put simply, the vote has been gerrymandered by the government with the assistance of political parties, namely Sinn Féin, the SDLP and the Alliance, who have spent the last quarter of a century telling us how wrong, how unjust it would be to have a vote on a simple majority basis. Today I find myself in what some here may argue is an odd position. I find myself part of a minority arguing for the fundamentals of the Belfast Agreement, arguing that its protections for minorities should continue to apply. But in another sense, I find myself validated because I and my party have always argued that the supposed guarantees of the Belfast Agreement were always a sham. The supposed... Yes, go on ahead.
I worked quite closely with his colleague, Mr Allister, on the Assembly and Executive Review Committee. And on that committee, others will be able to testify to this. Me and Mr Allister were the only two who actually agreed that getting rid of designations would actually be progress in this place. Is this a change now to TUV policy?
I thank the member for intervention, but I'm struggling to understand what the input was. There's certainly no change in TUV policy, but you've made your point. It's on Hansard, and congratulations. The supposed protections in the Belfast Agreement only ever applied for as long as they suited nationalism. Once unionism was in the minority in this place, the protections no longer apply. Why is that? Because the protections sold to unionists to justify throwing the prison doors open and agreeing to share power with those sworn to destroy the state were a sham. That isn't just the position of the anti-Belfast Agreement zealots. The Member of Parliament for South Antrim, Robin Swan, reminded the Commons on Friday what the chief unionist architect of the Belfast Agreement, Lord Trimble, had to say about the protocol. and indeed we heard it earlier from Mr Buckley. But for the record, for Hansard's benefit, I'll read it in once again. Lord Trimble, the late Lord Trimble said, "I feel betrayed personally by the Northern Ireland Protocol, and it is also why the Unionist population is so incensed at its imposition." That seems to be something the SDLP cannot get to grips with. That is our problem with the protocol, with the Windsor framework. Yet today, we have Sinn Féin, the SDLP and Alliance who are quite happy to play their part in betraying Lord Trimble's legacy. Today is a seminal day, particularly for the Alliance, who have come off the fence and decided to aid nationalism in doing what 30 years of terror failed to do in Northern Ireland: move the border to the Irish Sea. No wonder many refer to the Alliance as Sinn Féin's little helpers. As for the self-styled Social Democratic and Labour Party, we already know how far their leader told us people were prepared to go on this issue. She told us there would be civil disobedience at the very minimum if there was so much as a CCTV camera where the international border is. Perhaps the SDLP could clarify what did their leader mean? What is the next level up from social or civil disobedience? Mr Speaker, I contend that we only got to where we are today because of what Sean O'Casey would describe as the shadow of a gunman. But let me move on to what we are actually being asked to vote on today. I noted last week the SDLP travelled to Brussels to press for representation. Of course, such a route would disregard the Belfast Agreement as well. When the Belfast Agreement told Unionists in its opening paragraph that our position within the UK was accepted and respected, implicit in that was recognition of the right to take part in national debates. Debates like whether the UK should leave the EU. No ballot paper in any part of the UK asked people if they wanted GB to leave the EU and leave Northern Ireland behind. Sinn Féin, the SDLP and Alliance are telling their constituents that they aren't up to the job, that they are happy to surrender control in 300 areas of law to which no one in Northern Ireland is elected. 70 pages containing not the text of the law but merely the titles. How can any Democrat claim that is correct? Importantly, these laws are not incidental. EU Regulation 952/2013 puts us under the EU's Customs Code. That means that the rest of our country, the United Kingdom, is in terms a third country. To put it another way in which people will be familiar, a foreign country. So in terms of customs, we are now known as a foreign country. How absurd. All of that is because of the border with an EU member state. In 2020, the value of goods entering the EU single market via Northern Ireland was a mere 0.003% of EU GDP. The border posts aren't being built at Larne because of a threat to the EU single market, but because the EU decided that Northern Ireland would be the price the UK paid for Brexit. One only has to look at recent court judgments, where it has been decided that, to all intents and purposes, Northern Ireland is to be treated as EU territory. Indeed, let me quote from Mr Justice Colton, who has ruled that the UK is not to be treated as a unitary state for the purposes of OCR checks coming from GB into Northern Ireland. Today we are being asked to vote to accept colony status, to become a territory governed by someone else's laws from a foreign jurisdiction. How democratic, how republican is that? I want to move on to consider the economic case. Before the protocol, Northern Ireland's economy was very intertwined with the rest of the UK. Since then, we have seen a severing of links and businesses swamped with red tape. InvestNI has had to admit that they cannot point to a single job created in Northern Ireland because of the protocol. Why? Because businesses work on the basis of facts, not spin, regardless of what the SDLP tell us here tonight. It won't take them long to work out that the idea of dual market access is a nonsense, and that the protocol creates massive obstacles in bringing in raw materials from GB. I will remind the House that the one area of growth, and Mrs Dodds has already pointed this out, in Northern Ireland economy, where there has been an increase, where there has been growth, but doesn't fall under the protocol, and that's in our services sector. On Friday, my party leader brought a bill before the Commons which spelt out a solution to the problem: mutual enforcement, where each sovereign power undertakes to respect and enforce the standards of the other. I credit Jim Allister with the bill, but I cannot credit him with the idea. The proposal for mutual enforcement as a solution came from inside the EU. On Friday, Jim made public a statement from the three gentlemen involved, and let me read it into the record. On Friday of this week, the House of Commons will be debating a bill which attempts to address some of the difficulties resulting from the Brexit divorce agreements between the EU and the UK, which might be of interest to readers. In 2019, we proposed a solution which would have obviated any need for these complicated and divisive legal manoeuvres. The UK and the EU could have respected each other's positions and saved everyone a great deal of time and effort. The Financial Times characterised the proposal as a win-win solution. Regrettably, it was not followed because, as I have said, the EU and the Republic of Ireland sought to use Brexit as an opportunity for a land grab. Given that this debate could have happened as late as the 17th of December, it is striking to me that there was obviously a desire to get over with before the EU General Product Safety Regulations come into force on Friday, and possibly before the new NISRA trade data comes out tomorrow. I want to conclude by making an appeal to Unionists in this House. I will begin by referring to the High Court action brought by Jamie Bryson yesterday. I note that yesterday the Secretary of State sent in a team of 9 lawyers and that they threatened that they were going to seek costs. The judge in the case rightly dismissed that out of hand, all part of a desperate attempt to scare off any challenge. But let me quote from what Justice McAlinden said yesterday in respect of the so-called constitutional legislation and safeguarding the Union. This is just an example of the government throwing breadcrumbs, trying to presentationally keep everyone happy, but in reality without any legal effect. He added, why did the government pass legislation saying the Windsor Framework was without prejudice to the Acts of Union, when plainly the same Windsor Framework does have effects on the Acts of Union, placing Northern Ireland in a different place than the rest of the UK, which many people in our community do feel diminishes the Union. In reality, that legislation does not undo the holding in Allister, but restates it. Whatever you think of me and my party leader, it is indisputable that we have been proven to be correct when it comes to the impact and reality of the sea border and the Windsor Framework. No one can claim the Acts of Union have not been trashed. A judgment just yesterday reiterated the fact that they have been. No one in this chamber would repeat either today or at any other time the outlandish claims made by Sir Geoffrey Donaldson, which resulted in the restoration of these institutions. We all know what the results of this vote is going to be because of the Nationalist and Republican alliance. And for the benefit of Hansard, alliance is a capital A in the phrase I mentioned. The question is, what are you going to do about it? The assurances Unionists were given, whether they were in the Belfast Agreement or the Windsor Framework, clearly aren't worth the paper they are written on.
Order, Mr. Tennyson. In order for Mr Gaston to refer to the Alliance Party as Nationalist and Republican when it is clear that we designate in this Assembly as United Community?
Well, we all know how the Alliance Party has designated itself. Mr Gaston has made a different assertion to that. People are entitled to say things in this House. I'm not here as Speaker to be some speech watchdog. This is the debating chamber. I haven't finished, Ms Long. I am not here to tell everybody what they're supposed to say. People can say things which are wrong. That doesn't mean that they can't say it. Ms Long.
It is correct, of course, that people are entitled to hold their opinions, but are people entitled to state on the record things that are counterfactual?
In terms of what the member has said, he referred to nationalists, he referred to Republicans, he referred to the Alliance. That is for the member. How you vote tonight may reflect that. I don't know. It's up to yourselves how you vote. How you vote tonight may reflect that there is nationalists, Republicans and Alliance go through one lobby. That is something you are perfectly entitled to do. That is not a political statement. That is something you are perfectly entitled to do. If the member wishes to point that out, that is something that he is entitled to do. This is a debating chamber where people are allowed to have a go at each other, as they do in other debating chambers across the world. And I wish to goodness that members would be a little less sensitive to being attacked. If you're attacked, get up and make your case against the other individual. I will facilitate anybody to do that, but I'm not going to stand here and say you're not allowed to say this and you're not allowed to say that across this chamber. It is a debating chamber. Take it on as a debating chamber. It is not a student debating chamber.
Much, Mr Speaker, and we have appeared to touch a raw nerve where the Nationalist and Republican Alliance, certainly there's a bone of contention there. Yes, you might not be designated at that, but certainly within Unionist circles that's the perception, and I certainly believe that. And I restate my comment I made earlier about you being Sinn Féin's little helpers, and on this basis you'll trip through the lobbies with them later on, I'm quite sure. So moving back to what I was saying. Oh, I will give way because you look cross.
The lobby that I vote through tonight will be based on what I believe and what I stand for. You are no more the DUP's little helper than I am anybody else's little helper, and the member would do well. The member would do well to extend to other people the courtesy that he would expect to be extended to him. I find it outrageous that I have been accused of being a nationalist or a Republican here tonight, just as I would find it outrageous to be accused of being a Unionist or a Loyalist.
Point of order, Mr Buckley.
Mr Speaker, could you please confirm for clarity of the House that Mrs Long is not the Speaker of this House?
I don't think that's a point of order. Order. I don't think it's a point of order. Mrs Long made her defence, and that's what I encouraged her to do, and she was quite right to do that. Thank you.
Mr Speaker, offence is a choice. So as when we talk about courtesy, I'll let the member in. I thought that was me being courtesy. Oh, but she obviously disagrees with that, chuntering in her sedentary position there. But listen, I'm sure we'll have many a dispute in the months to come and years to come, whether you like it or not. But just getting back to where I was, to put it to you that this House operates on a sham basis, we have seen that here tonight. Minority protections clearly only apply to non-unionists. Why, therefore, do unionists continue to prop up this sham? And to pick up on a couple of points that were made earlier on, the Deputy First Minister, yes, in her capacity as an MLA, had mentioned about sending the strong message to Westminster. I would say that the strong message that we could have sent to Westminster was only returning to this House to vote against this motion in front of us tonight. The position of unionism has been weakened by a return to this House and operating the very mechanisms which are ushering us out of the UK. So I would ask the member and the party to reflect on that position, because I believe, yes, I want to go forward strong with a united voice in opposition to the protocol, but certainly we need to grow a backbone and we need to use the leverage that's at our disposal, and on that basis, when our rights have been trampled, when unionism is in the minority, it's disregarded by this side of the House, we need to question the very existence of the institutions that we are sitting in here tonight. I will give way.
Particular words that you used when you said that your rights have been trampled. But surely, both yesterday and indeed today, the Lord Chief Justice upheld the decision to allow this House to take part in a democratic vote. How have your rights been trampled when the highest court in Northern Ireland has made that decision?
I thank the member for his intervention. What was being tested in the courts was this document here, the Safeguarding the Union, that what was sold to unionism in Northern Ireland is to bring back the institutions, to test what was in it and what we were told. And it turned out the safeguards that are in Safeguarding the Union aren't worth the paper they're wrote on. But when I go back to rights, when we talk about rights, I'm talking about the Belfast Agreement. I'm talking about the cross-community consent. I'm talking about that the government took action to remove that, to ensure that this vote here tonight was being gerrymandered in a way that they got what they want. That is exactly what has happened. When unionism has been in the minority in this House, our rights have been diminished, our rights have been trampled on. And if this vote was going the other way, the Alliance Party, Nationalism, Republican Alliance Party as they are, Sinn Féin's little helpers would be the first ones to stand up and be calling it out. But because it's going against unionism, the Alliance Party and Bloc are saying nothing about it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Point of order, Ms. Long.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would like to Mr. Speaker, I'd like to draw your attention to Standing Order 65, and I would ask that you take a ruling on this matter, please. In Standing Order 65, it says the Speaker may, if any member wilfully assaults, molests, obstructs or acts in a disorderly manner towards the Speaker or any other member. Tonight, in the fact that Alliance Party and those who do not designate as Nationalists or Unionists have had our designation besmirched, called out, disrespected, I would like the Minister, if possible, Speaker, if you could make a ruling on that.
I thought I made it clear to Mrs. Long. We are not here, and if this desk had to correct everything that everybody said in this chamber as being wrong, we would do nothing else, because there's an awful lot said that's wrong in this chamber. So, for example, there was a debate yesterday about Mr. Carroll's comments, for example, about a company that uses this, that provides services at this facility, as to whether that should have been ruled in or ruled out. And it was allowed because it was part of the debate. So you can fundamentally disagree with what the person says. What the person says may well be inaccurate. Ms. Long took the opportunity to correct it. That's done. The Alliance Party has stated their position. They have sought to correct what Mr. Gaston said. As far as I'm concerned, that is the matter finished. And that is what happens in a debating chamber. If someone says something that's wrong, in your view, you get up and you challenge it and you make your case and you allow the public to make their decision thereafter. Moving on. Point of order, Mr. Gaston.
That this indeed is a political chamber, because we seem to be getting very offended that everything that has been said, if maybe they don't like the member. My goodness, I had to apologise to get speaking here tonight, so I'm glad that I was given the opportunity, apart from the interventions from the Alliance Party, but remind them this is a political chamber.
I think that you having to apologise, Mr. Gaston, was a demonstration of me treating the entire chamber fairly, because you were wrong in what you done yesterday. But in turn, who's sorry now? But very good, Mr. Durkin. In terms of what's going on tonight, it is debate, and I will tolerate debate, and I will give everyone the opportunity to clarify their issues through points of order on occasions, even though they're not points of order, and through interventions, if that's how it can be done. It is a debating chamber. Make your case and stop appealing to me to be some big watchdog who's going to be policing every word that every person says, because we will get nowhere if I have to do that. Mr. Carl, it's your turn, and I'm sure you'll not say anything controversial whatsoever. Mr. Dixon.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Gaston said he had to apologise to you in order to speak here this evening. Yes. That sounds to me to be the most insincere apology that you have ever received in this chamber, and I would ask you to rule on the sincerity of that apology.
You may well be correct, Mr. Dixon, but I can't rule on the sincerity of Mr. Gaston's apology. He did make an apology, that's what he was asked to do, and we are moving on. Let's not disrupt. You might want to stay here all night. I'm happy to stay all night. I thought actually you were all wilting there some time ago, but you may want to stay here all night. But perhaps we'll not disrupt Mr. Carroll's flow and let him get out of here.
Third time lucky. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just like yesterday, everything I'm saying is connected to the issue we're discussing this evening, and I found it almost, and I have to say, almost humorous hearing some Unionists talking about minority rights and being trampled on during this debate. I mean, you couldn't really make it up. How many